Yeah. Oil. Big fan of these. Great for the Boxster. Next up, remove these covers. It's 1, 2, 3 10mm heads, and then 1, 2, 3 Torx T25s on both sides. This panel is on top of this one, so once you remove all three, and then we just pull it off like this, without applying too much force, just by twisting it a little. Same thing for this, just pull it off at the top. 10mm. Makes quick work of it, and then you just pull it out, pops it right out. Super duper easy. And guess what? Here are our spark plugs. Same panel removal on the driver's side. Gives us the spark plugs on the driver's side. If we go to our specialty socket drawer, we need external Torx, which looks like a star angled in. At least on the 987.1, at least on my particular model. And we need the E10 size. So there are these little star-shaped thingies that this goes on. You want to use the right bit to avoid stripping them. Once we have that in hand, you're also going to need the special spark plug remover tool. I got this one off Amazon, I believe. I'll drop a link in the description for all the ones you need. They're 16mm. It's magnetic at the tip. This is a regular socket, and it bends like this. So it's a very specialized tool. As you see, it has a lot of different teeth here. Might as well, while we're at it, this is what I bought for this procedure. Just in case, even though it's 6-cylinder, I bought 8 spark plugs in case. Just in case, I also bought 2 of these ignition coils in case it turns out that the ignition coils are going bad. And I'll have 2 on hand so I don't have to like wait up to a week and a half in the future. We've covered the special tools, covered the parts that we need. Let's get to using that E10 E-Torx socket. Before we disconnect the coil packs, we're going to actually need to disconnect coil packs from the electrical connection. In order to disconnect, to remove the spark plugs, first we want to disconnect the coils. In order to do so, we can take a flathead screwdriver. Since I've recently done this, the rubber covers are looser. We just pull back these rubber covers, press on this clip, and just push out. And congratulations, you've successfully disconnected one spark plug coil. This one's a little tougher to film with one hand. Let's see my finger dexterity. 2. I've been working on this car for a while now, so I am getting good at German engineering finger gymnastics. I should make t-shirts that say that. And passenger side disconnected. Switching to left hand, right hand camera, left hand gymnastics. Uno. Left hand film, right hand gymnastics. Boom. Left hand film, right hand gymnastics. Boom. And like that, your coils are disconnected. Next, we take this external Torx E10 and actually take out all 6 bolts on both sides. The only difficult bolt that you have to whip out your Tony Stark eye protection glasses because you lost your clear ones and get under the car for is the most farthest spark plug coil bolt over there. I'm doing my best to film it so you can see. People like to say it is very difficult, but I don't find it too difficult. What you do is you get under the car. Hopefully you can see what I see. You get a short extension, a spinny thingy, and then your E-Torx. You take off your swivel and E-Torx. Let me flip the camera around. We're under the car with a flashlight shining up from the driver's side. First, you take your dominant hand or whatever's easiest, and you actually get it on this bolt because there's a coolant line in the way. So that's the most, I guess, challenging part, is getting it on the bolt. Then once you've got it on the bolt, it's more difficult to film this with 2 hands than actually twist it. Once you've gotten it on the bolt, basically you put the swivel out this way to the right, and then you just proceed to get it loose. So there we go. And then on the right hand side through here, I've exposed this. So if I weren't filming, I would use my second hand to put in the key and break it loose. And then once you've broken it loose and it spins pretty freely, just get your hand in there. And then you just finish it off with your hand. The rest of the bolts are easy. Careful not to strip them because they're same stuff for the passenger side. But leave a comment below if you need any help on approach angles or anything like that. I had to take my insurance out, get under the car. So now we will put insurance back before getting back to the passenger side. Here, between these two is a good spot where the support arm is. Contact, and we're done. Passenger side time. A driver with a flexible tip makes quick work of all of the bolts. We'll use hand for the rest of it. For me, the most difficult bolt on the passenger side was on the first spark plug you see. Right adjacent, like rubbing up against these coolant lines. And the way I was able to do it was with a swivel adapter with a short extension. And the way you get to it is actually from above the coolant lines. So you put in the tail end of the tool here, and then you go tail end to the right. Focus, please. Tail end to the right. I hit the power button, and then your tool from above the coolant lines, and then onto here, onto the bolt. If I wasn't filming with one hand, I would show you how to maneuver it. You don't want to puncture these possibly fragile coolant lines. And that's how you get all the bolts out. Scot-free on the passenger side. Our next step, now that everything is disconnected and the bolts have been removed, is the most difficult one. Just kidding. Gently tug on the coil pack and keep tugging until it's out. You might have to twist a little. And do the same for all 6. That's the most difficult one, by the way. On video, I did the most difficult one. You just have to twist it a little in order to get it out. Eventually, this is what it looks like. There's your spark plug in there. And do that for all 6. The driver's side coil pack, the farthest one, also gave me some difficulty because of these lines that are in the way. You basically get it halfway through, you push these lines a little back, get it halfway out, and then you basically bend the coil pack and pull it out. And this is what your engine should look like from both sides. with your packs out.
For removing the spark plugs themselves, you might be able to get away with using a hand tool, as well as some useful extensions and adapters that we're showing here. In my case, they were torqued down pretty decently, so at first I tried doing this with a hand tool that I saw on a forum, but I did need more extensions that I'm currently putting on the hand tool as shown.
I'm just breaking it loose. Okay, it's a little tight. I'll disconnect that. Mine was a little tighter than that, so I switched over to a socket tool. Basically a long contraption in here.
The spark plug tool and an extension on the socket. Extensions are your friend in difficult to reach areas.
It's grabbed.
For the first plug, I used one of those smaller sockets, but for the remainders, I used a longer wrench to break them.
Finishing it off by hand. And let's see how bad air oil separator failure is for your spark plugs.
I'm adding this later in editing. For context, my air oil separator failed, causing a lot of oil in the engine, a lot of smoke, and all that good stuff. So the reason for actually removing and replacing the spark plugs,
so look at that. Mine are covered in oil.
Is because they were most likely coated in oil.
Reeks of oil.
As we can see here, they're all burnt. And I was getting misfires, which actually turned out to be the mass airflow sensor. Stay tuned for that video.
This is all burnt oil burnt onto it, and I took that personally. So perhaps this is burnt on oil. So let's see how the rest of the spark plugs look. And that's what it looks like on the inside. Yeah. Oil. Get to the farthest spark plugs on either side. I'm using the spark plug tool plus a swivel socket plus one extension plus two extensions. I'm using this contraption to aim by hand. I'm getting the tip there in, and then I'm using a third extension. Look at that, all that oil. Even though I did my spark plugs a few thousand miles ago, I'm just going to go and maybe swap these guys out anyway. Moral of the story, air oil separator, do it early. I'm not sure if when I put in new spark plugs, if it's going to mess up these new ones. I hope not, and I'm going to do some reading. Because otherwise, what's the point if there's still oil in the chamber that's not burning through? That's what's messing the spark plugs up. What's the point of putting new ones if the new ones are going to get covered in oil too? Unless I just repeatedly put in new spark plugs until all the old oil is gone and stops causing misfires. I'm definitely not technically savvy enough yet to clean the oil chamber, so I'm going to Google clean failed air oil separator or something. But anyways, at this point, it's always fun when YouTube videos say, just do everything I just did, but in reverse, because it's the exact same. They're definitely not going to be nothing that can possibly go wrong and be complicated. So this is where the video ends. Just kidding. We're not going to do it like that. We're going to show you the next steps to putting it all back together.
And here we're just removing the rest of the spark plugs on the passenger side, as well as shortly all of the spark plugs on the driver's side as well. There weren't any exceptionally difficult ones, just play with the extensions that you use. With enough extensions, anything becomes possible, at least for spark plugs. Here are the old and dirty ones, covered in oil, even though it changed a couple thousand miles ago compared to the new ones on the right, in the middle.
We made the executive decision to replace these with new ones.
Brand new spark plugs have been heavily oiled and covered with partially burned oil due to air oil separator malfunction, and of course we are replacing them with new ones. But I wanted to recall how 30 years ago we were saving spark plugs and cleaning them, old school method.
Oh, it smells so bad.
It should smell as if oil is burning. And once it is burned through, we can brush off the ashes.
So after we've heated all of them and burned off, you can see that the rightmost one is looking a lot better than the old ones. The most important part is heating up the tips, the metal tips, and avoiding cracking the ceramic glass. So to install the new spark plugs, insert the new spark plug into the socket like so. The spark plug end facing towards the engine. And reversing the steps to get it back into the engine. We'll start with the farthest one. So there is 1, 2, 3. So 3 is the hardest one on the driver's side. Our swivel sockets are gonna come in handy. Get it aligned with the hole. Got it aligned. It's still being magnetically gripped by hand. We can tighten the spark plug in. You don't want to force it. And just like that, it's done. If you can't, you definitely want to be careful not to strip the threads. I was fortunate enough where I got the right angle with the swivel tool that I just hopped onto the threads. But if you want to do this by hand, you can also first get the spark plug in by hand to get the threads perfectly aligned. So I'm going to do the same for these two as well as the passenger side now. Just hand tightening. I almost forgot to mention, we want to torque all of them to 22 foot-pounds using no anti-seize compound. I will do the most difficult one as an example. Getting your tool to 22 foot-pounds, 10, 22. There we go. I'm done. Now repeat the same for all 5 other spark plugs. Leave a comment below if you have any difficulty reaching those angles. All 6 spark plugs are back in the holes. This upcoming step, so if you've been having specific misfires on a specific cylinder, now is a good opportunity to replace your coil packs. They're about $55 at the time of the making of this video. But if you've been using, I use I believe it's called the iCar Soft. Where is that thing? So I use the iCar Soft, which I'll leave a link to too. You can actually read your check engine light codes and reset them, which is super handy. You don't have to go to the dealer. Very cool thing. I'll make a video on it at some point. If your iCar Soft is telling you that cylinder is bad, the new coil packs look like this. They're pretty nice and new looking. And I'm going to hold on to my 2 to have a spares, since for me it's not specific cylinder misfires. The engine codes I've been getting are across all cylinders.
And these also come with new eTorx bolts that we're about to use to reinstall.
If all your coil packs are good, it does not matter in any particular order in which you install them. The connection will end up top. So once I'll do the hardest cylinder for the example one. I'm just putting this in at an angle, like so, to get it around the pipes on the left, like so. I'm bending it in a little. I'm moving the pipe as I gently push in and bend a little. Voila. And the hardest one is in. At this time I can also do hand gymnastics, filming right hand, gymnastics left. Ooh, satisfying click. Push in. Done. Replace the rubber. Pull it back down to protect those connections from the elements and such. And do a visual check to make sure. See, this little thingy, the little cap has to go over the clip that you press on. You just press down with 2 fingers and you're done. That was the hardest cylinder to do. I'm on the passenger side now, and all of the coil packs are back in place. For putting the bolts back, the same tricks apply. First, you want to get the easiest ones in by hand most of the way. You want to get the difficult ones in by hand as well with the approach angles that we covered in the first part. As a refresher, this is the hardest bolt that I'm working on now. On the passenger side, it's the leftmost one at the top left, in my humble opinion. And the way to get this is from the top with a swivel angle with a side extension. Unfortunately, filming is difficult using one hand and approaching this, but I'm going to use a swivel above the coolant pipes. There's barely enough clearance between the pipes and the socket here. The torquing is 7 for the coil bolts.
Here I'm reinstalling the regularly accessible bolts, and for the top left driver bolt, it's easiest to get under the car, use a swivel extension as seen in the first part, and then moving the black wiring. Watch the removal chapter if you missed it.
At this point, you're basically done. We'll put the covers on. $10mm, the same way we took them off. First putting this glorious large plastic piece in to align, to click in on the left hand side and then fold over. And then this little piece that goes over that you can use the bottom hole to line with under the hose, onto the studs, and that's it. 10mm on 10mm, T25 hex into these holes. It helps to start them by hand because they like to move around, especially these metal brackets. And then we're done. So let's go for a test drive. And for me, it's gonna be in about 10 minutes when I get these on. For y'all, it's gonna be right now. 118 foot-pounds. Before you Google it, the old spec is 96 foot-pounds and the new spec is 118. I'm not trying to strip any bolts, so I'll do 112 foot-pounds. Don't forget to remove your wheel chucks.
And you can check off a maintenance item, or hopefully your misfires have been addressed. Unfortunately, in my specific scenario, it turned out to be the mass airflow sensor, and that's a cleaning video, and that is coming up next on how to replace and or clean your mass airflow sensor. By the way, make sure to check out the video logs on getting organized, garage TV setup, as well as the toolbox cabinets, as well as check out the other video on how to cheaply jack up your car using wood blocks and not spending $1,500 to $2,500 on quick jacks or two-post lifts. Thanks for tuning in, and consider hitting the subscribe and like button if this has been helpful.